Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for all things giallo here on The King in Giallo. We are continuing our coverage for the third giallo film directed by Luciano Ercoli, Death Walks at Midnight, released on November 17th, 1972. In this video, I will give you a condensed version of the full-length overview video covering only the cast and crew and the plot of the movie. Then I'll transition into the GialliTally. The GialliTally will contain heavy spoilers. Here is Death Walks at Midnight. Overview. Death Walks at Midnight, also called Cry Out in Terror, is an Italian and Spanish co-production. The film is directed by Luciano Ercoli. The screenplay is written by Ernesto Gastaldi and Mahnahén Velasco from an idea by Sergio Corbucci. Music is composed by Gianni Ferrio. The cast is comprised of Nieves Navarro, billed as Susan Scott, as Valentina, Simón Andreu as Joe Baldi, Pietro Matalanza, billed as Peter Martell, as Stefano, Claudio Lange as Verushka Wuttenberg, Luciano Rossi as Hans Kreutzer, Carlo Gentili as Inspector Serino, and Fabrizio Maresco as Pepito. The plot follows Valentina, a fashion model who agrees to take part in an experiment with a new hallucinogenic drug. Under its influence, she experiences euphoric visions, only to witness a brutal murder in the apartment across the street. When she insists that what she saw was real, neither her boyfriend Joe nor the authorities believe her. Convinced she's in danger, Valentina sets out to prove it herself, unaware that her determination has put her squarely in the killer's sights. But I digress. On to the GialliTally. Spoilers ahead for those of you who haven't yet seen the film. You've been warned. My prediction for the movie's GialliTally score. I forgot to give a prediction in my unscripted review video, so I will predict around 575 to 625 points. Well, let's begin the GialliTally portion of the video. Beginning, as always, with the previewing cliches. The repeat offenders are 1 point for actor, 3 for writer, 3 for composer, and 5 for director. Nieves Navarro was in So Sweet, So Dead, Kill the Poker Player, All the Colors of the Dark, Death Walks on High Heels, The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, and Naked Violence, 6 points. Simón Andreu was in Death Walks on High Heels and The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, 2 points. Peter Martell was in The French Sex Murders and A Game of Crime, 2 points. Carlo Gentili was in AAA Masseuse Good Looking Offers Her Services, The Night of the Scorpion, and Death Walks on High Heels, 3 points. Ivan Staccioli was in So Sweet, So Dead, Kill the Poker Player, The Devil with Seven Faces, and A for Assassin, 4 points. Fabrizio Maresco was in The Red Queen Kills 7 Times, So Sweet, So Dead, and Death Walks on High Heels, 3 points. Alessandro Perella was in Death Falls Lightly, The Killer is on the Phone, The French Sex Murders, and Beleth, the Demon of Incest, 4 points. Luciano Rossi was in The Terror with Cross Eyes, So Sweet, So Dead, and Death Walks on High Heels, 3 points. Manuel Muniz has an uncredited appearance in Death Walks on High Heels, 1 point. Claudio Lange was in Death Walks on High Heels, 1 point. Franco Caracciolo has an uncredited appearance in The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, 1 point. Filippo Lanive has uncredited appearances in Death Occurred Last Night and The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, 2 points. Vittorio Pinelli has an uncredited appearance in The Designated Victim, 1 point. Sergio Corbucci wrote The Girl Who Knew Too Much, 3 points. Ernesto Gastaldi wrote Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key, The Case of the Bloody Iris, All the Colors of the Dark, Death Walks on High Heels, The Case of the Scorpion's Tail, Human Cobras, The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward, The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, So Sweet, So Perverse, The Sweet Body of Deborah, A for Assassin, The Murder Clinic, libido, and the possessed. 42 points. Mahnahén Velasco wrote Death Walks on High Heels and The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion. 6 points. Johnny Ferrio composed The Bloodstained Butterfly and Death Occurred Last Night. 6 points. And Luciano Ercoli directed Death Walks on High Heels and The Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion. 10 points. Cliché points for the title. Death Walks at Midnight contains the word death. 5 points. Is a declaration. 5 points. Death Walks at Midnight, does it? First look. 25 points for the Italian director, 15 points for the movie releasing during the golden age of giallo cinema, and I might not think so, but 15 points for this being a quintessential giallo film. And would you look at that, it is plot o'clock. Cold open, 5 points. This is Valentina, a model. F is for fashion, extra points for a character working in fashion, 10 points. Art featured, 5 points. We receive our opening credits. Italian locales, Milan, 3 points. Urban locales, 2 points. Spiral staircase, 5 points. This man rings the buzzer and drops in. This is Joe, Valentina's boyfriend, a newspaper reporter who has arrived with a doctor and his assistant. R is for reporter, 5 points. They are running an experiment with Valentina. Joe pays Valentina for participating. The doctor assures her that this experimental drug is safe, and Valentina urges Joe to not photograph her face or use her name in the story. Joe provides her with a mask to conceal her identity. They begin the test while Joe dictates. Audio recording device, 5 points. Illicit drugs taken, 5 points. The hallucinogen, HDS, is injected and we are off to the races. Valentina rather quickly becomes loopy and a bit hysterical. They rip the mask off, but she is too far gone to protest or even notice. She bounces around while Joe snaps photos. From across the way, she sees a woman being attacked by a man. H is for hallucinations. Extra points for drugs, plus for being a witness to a murder. 10 points. W is for witness. 5 points. She asserts to seeing a man murdering a girl using a metal fist lined with spikes. The others assume this to all just be a mad hallucination. The next day, Valentina is fired from her job for the scandal. I want you to see how this moment plays out differently from the English to the Italian.
How did she get off firing me? I'll throttle that phony-faced-lifted hooker. Oh, I should have smacked her. Accidenti, accidenti a sto bauscia carogna. Ma lo strozzo se lo becco. Accidenti a lui, alla rivista quando ci tocca scada.
I personally think the English version of the same beat is bad, and it makes it look like Nieves Navarro just cannot act, but in the Italian version, it actually seems totally appropriate. I don't know if that makes any sense. Valentina confronts Joe for lying to her about keeping her anonymity. L is for lies, 5 points. Joe claims that otherwise the photos would have been ruined and he needed it to cover his working expenses. He tries to assuage her frustration by promising to buy her dinner tonight, but no cigar. Valentina goes into a rage and she is escorted out of the office after noticing the doctor from last night actually works at the newspaper. As she's thrown out, a man asks to speak with her, but Valentina blows him off. She hurls a rock through Joe's window. Z is for zoom, 5 points. Valentina is picked up by the police. Cut to her being interrogated by Inspector Serino over the window incident and what her motive was. Q is for questions, 5 points. Joe arrives and says the newspaper will not press charges. Inspector Serino is brought a copy of the story and asks them if it is true that Valentina took experimental drugs. Joe denies that it is true, only a sensational story that he made up for the readers. Serino scolds the two about the dangers of drugs, and they're dismissed. Serino relays to his assistant that Joe, in addition to being a published writer, also took a degree in chemistry, according to his identity card. This is Stefano, who let himself in. He says he'll go, but Valentina tells him to hold on to her keys, which she'd given him, and remarks that she should have married him. He quips about how he'd be in hot water then because of her recent scandal. He relays how in the story, Valentina claimed to have seen a murder, which she says is true. The porter whistles outside, stating that he has a message for her, plus announcing that he'd forgotten the milk. It might be an important detail for later. The message is from an unknown prospective client who saw Valentina in the paper and wishes to hire her on as a model for their new product. Directions are given for her to meet with them. Stefano offers to go for her, considering it is next door, but she declines this. Valentina arrives at the location while being followed by the killer. Extra points for W is for the witness being stalked afterward. 5 more points. She goes up and inquires in the darkness, but receives no answer. She peruses around. On the balcony, she can see across to her apartment with Stefano still there. She tries to get his attention, but the music is too loud. She goes to leave, but in the elevator, Valentina sees the killer and flees. Valentina runs to the balcony and calls out to Stefano, but he still cannot hear her. Y is for yelling. Extra points for a hysterical woman yelling. 10 points. Valentina grabs a shard from a mirror and reflects the light into the apartment, which manages to get his attention. Mirror being used beyond its natural purpose. 2 points. Stefano runs over at once. Valentina rushes to lock the doors against the killer. E is for eyeball. 5 points. Close up on a door handle. 5 points. The killer begins punching through the door. Valentina is trapped inside. She runs for the balcony and ascends the ladder to the roof, but is grabbed. It's Stefano. While Valentina explains to Stefano that she was just attacked by the killer, we can see said killer sneaking out the back. Stefano is annoyingly dismissive and obtuse in regards to Valentina's claims. He asserts there was no one here and the door was already open. He blames the drugs for her breaking down mentally. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny, woman is gaslit. 4 points. Stefano further claims that the porter said that there were no tenants here, but when she brings up the note, he says it must be one of her friends playing a joke. Downstairs, they run into Joe with the porter. Joe proposes that he and Valentina continue to work together, and Stefano excuses himself, saying next time she's in danger to call him instead. Joe informs Valentina that a woman was murdered in this building 6 months ago with some strange bladed weapon. He asks how she could have seen this murder the other night. Valentina realizes that what she saw was real and that she may be in actual danger. Joe accuses Valentina of having already heard about this past murder, but she denies this. Over lunch, Joe proposes that Valentina must have witnessed the murder, but she had buried it in her subconscious, and that the drug must have unlocked the memory. She connects this as being the killer's motive to come after her because she could identify him. Joe says this:
"The killer is trying to get rid of me."
Of course, you idiot.
Typical 1970s Italian misogyny, woman is called an idiot. 3 points. Joe goes on to say that he doesn't believe Valentina, but his editor does, and they want to buy exclusive rights to the story from Valentina herself. She must not speak to any reporters other than Joe. While Joe orders a J&B, the killer stalks outside the window, staring in at Valentina. She informs Joe and runs to chase the killer before he gets away. She runs into the same man from the other day who warns Valentina that she's in danger, but they shrug him off. Foot chase, 5 points. The two chase the killer through the crowded streets, but he gets away. Joe informs Valentina that the killer is actually already in captivity, and this is why he didn't fear that she was in any real danger. Valentina meets with Inspector Serino in a crowded nightclub. Gratuitous 70s dancing, 2 points. The inspector tells her that the woman killed 6 months ago was a pusher in the drug trade. Likewise, the killer was an addict. Valentina denies an involvement with the drug trade, asserting that she knew nothing of their criminal history, but he states that all of this she could have read 6 months ago in the paper. Joe arrives and passes this group.
Ooh, the journalist.
Is Valentina here?
Come to drink at the well.
Queer characters. Gay man, 5 points. Inspector Serino says that, unfortunately, Valentina's story has too many points to it. Regardless of whether she was stoned or not, the unoccupied apartment, the appointment, and the wreck door, not to mention the killer being under surveillance for over 6 months. Valentina excuses herself. Joe tells Valentina that the editor believes this story is a goldmine. He informs her that the victim 6 months ago was sentenced to 4 years in Hamburg, Germany for drug trafficking. He clarifies that the killer is not in prison, but in an asylum. Lastly, he adds that the editor, despite not believing Valentina either, will pay her 400,000 lira for the story. By the way, there's an out-of-focus J&B bottle there, but let's wait. Outside, Valentina is intercepted by a woman seeking to talk with her about the story. The woman asks to speak with her privately and invites her into the car. In the car, the woman hands Valentina photographs and asks if she recognizes the woman in the photos, but she doesn't. The woman claims this girl in the photos is her younger sister, Helena, the murder victim. Valentina denies this being the girl she saw being murdered, but the woman driving assumes she's mistaken. Valentina rejects this, stating she'll never forget that woman's face, nor the killer's. The woman driving informs her that they are headed to the asylum right now, so Valentina can identify the killer. She says the killer was found in the same room as the murder, drugged out of his mind. Exposition dumping, 2 points. Valentina demands to be taken home, but the woman continues. Valentina calls her crazy, and she slams on the brakes and orders her not to call her crazy again. Well, for slamming the brakes on a highway, let's do reckless driving, 5 points. They arrive. The woman finally introduces herself as Verushka. Inside, the place is a veritable nut house. They are shown to the killer, who seems to be unresponsive. As Valentina goes to see him, Verushka hears someone and hides. The nun, who by the way was also in Salo or the 120 Days of Sodom, says that he's so well behaved and couldn't defend himself at his own trial. Character is mute, mentally impaired, or babbles, 2 points. The two hear footsteps and notice Verushka has gone. First person POV, 5 points. On her way out, Valentina is accosted by the patients. Her assault is broken up by the staff, by this doctor in particular. He leads her out a safer way. She passes a weapon mount displaying the spiked metal gauntlet. Once outside, Valentina sees Verushka driving away. She chases after the car, but it is no use. She's nearly hit by this van. She asks the driver for a ride to Milan, and he acquiesces. The driver is an obvious pervert who steals glances at Valentina and tries to serenade her.
Drink?
No, thanks.
Oh, drinking and driving, that's good. They drive past a hearse adorned with flowers for the deceased, named Dolores. In the car behind the hearse, Valentina sees the killer and asks the driver to speed up. He does so, and they leave the hearse behind in the dust. He pulls off the highway and decides now is a good time to put the moves on Valentina. She rejects him, but he persists. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny, woman is SA'd, 7 points. N is for nudity, 5 points. He throws her in the back, but she fights him off. Woman outmuscles a man, 15 points. She flags down a police car and tells them about the driver who tried to assault her, the hearse, as well as the murderer she saw in a passing Mercedes who has tried to kill her with an iron fist. Naturally, they seem very taken aback, but agree to stop the hearse as it drives up. The driver didn't see anyone driving behind him, what with all the flowers, however, so they take Valentina to Inspector Serino. She confirms with the inspector that she saw the killer from her hallucination, but denies that the victim from 6 months ago was the woman whom she saw being murdered. She denies that the murderer from 6 months ago, a saxophonist and a druggie, is the killer she asserts to seeing the other night. Valentina suddenly sees the woman whom she saw murdered, featured in the newspaper. The inspector says this woman's name is Dolores, but she was mangled by a train. Valentina is insistent that this is the woman she saw being slain. Inspector Serino threatens that if Valentina and Joe are making all of this up for a sensational story, that he will arrest the two of them. She storms out.
Ah, that little bitch!
Inspector Serino inquires about the file on some woman whom he relays is from London, lives alone, and has relations with a magazine writer, then orders her to be left alone until further notice. It sounds like they're talking about Valentina, but the way it's written, it seems like maybe they're talking about some other woman. I guess we'll find out. Later, at a discotheque, Valentina is drunk and demands more whiskey. From across the room, she sees the same young man who twice has tried to speak with her. She goes over to speak with him. The man shows her a photograph of himself with another man in a jazz band. The other man is Nicola, the killer in the asylum. The man asserts that his friend is innocent. He warns again that Valentina is in great danger. Suddenly, the lights go down and he skedaddles. When the lights come back up, the gay photographer invites everyone to follow him to an after party. Hippies, extra points for drug use, 5 points. This scene goes on for quite a while and honestly does not really serve any purpose. Valentina excuses herself and leaves. Outside, she sees the killer standing behind her, reflected in her compact. She flees and escapes into a taxicab. She arrives outside Stefano's and goes in. We see that he is an artist who works with wood. He shows Valentina the 2 sleeping children of his friend who is staying in town for an exhibition. C is for children, 5 points. He suggests that they settle and have kids of their own, but she changes the subject, stating that she was just attacked by the killer, but he changes the subject as well, hoping for them to be romantic. It's so odd how he just, completely blows her off. He won't have any of it. He carries her off to bed and proposes that having a kid will break her from all of these wild fantasies she's been having. She weeps out of fear, but he says she's safe with him, then gives her the smooches. I'll add necking, 5 points. The next morning, there's an awkward exchange with the kids.
You were with Stefano together in bed.
I saw you.
Yes, so did I, when I was awake last night. You and Uncle Stefano. Woo.
Guess Valentina and Stefano won't be winning Parent of the Year. Catch the laughs, the love, and the lunacy next time on Two's Company Murders a Crowd. This series is taped before a live studio audience. For tickets, call 1-800-555-9 or send a postcard to Crimson Tower Studios, P.O. Box 1479, Toluca Lake, California, 91602. We don't see it, but I'll add it since it's coming up. V is for voyeur, extra points for the voyeurs being children, and extra points for it being an act of infidelity. 15 points. Technically, Valentina and Joe have been explicitly stated to be in a relationship. I is for infidelity, 5 points. That's something that I find very confusing, by the way, because yes, they are like written to be like, that's my boyfriend, that's my girlfriend. But then she's like freely hooking up with Stefano. And then like when the two men are in the same room together, it's never like, hey, that's my girl. What are you doing? It's so weird. It's so weird. I feel like it's supposed to be this passing statement about how liberated Valentina is, that she's just freely hooking up with any guy she wants to. I don't know. It's really bizarre. But anyways, moving on. It's not important. The two lovebirds head down to Stefano's gallery. Extra points for art being central to the plot. Another 5 points. This is Vanessa, and she tells Stefano that he is being commissioned to design a mausoleum, but must inspect the surroundings in the graveyard beforehand, but he admits that he's busy tomorrow. Valentina offers to survey the plot of land in his stead. She's at the cemetery now with her photographer, Jack. He takes photos of the surroundings while she takes measurements. Valentina sees Verushka standing before her and asks why she's returned after abandoning her at the asylum. Verushka says she's here to visit her sister's tomb. She says she left the asylum in a hurry because she didn't want word getting out that she was there because her husband, Professor Otto Wuttenberg, is fed up with Verushka asking about what happened to her sister because he loathed her. She says he's an important professor of psychiatry and he will put Verushka away in a mental hospital if she keeps digging, as he's apparently done before. Verushka asserts that the man they saw in the asylum is not her sister's killer. She claims that the real killer is desperate to kill the two of them because they know the truth. Just then, someone cuts a rope which drops an angel statue, nearly killing Valentina. G is for gloves, extra points for them being black, 10 points. K is for knives, 5 points. Verushka flees. Valentina catches up. Verushka declares it is the killer, but Valentina denies this, saying it was just a coincidence. Way to gaslight another woman after you've yourself been repeatedly gaslit, Valentina. That's one of my main gripes with this script, is just how flippantly people blow off anybody else's assertion. Like, no, that's not true. No, you're crazy. Whatever. Seems to be a running gag for the whole movie. Valentina goes to get her purse while Verushka goes to start the car. Valentina finds her purse, but is stopped by the same doctor who assisted her at the asylum. This is Professor Otto Wuttenberg. He tells her Verushka is troubled and she should stay away from her. He asks if she mentioned Hamburg, but Valentina denies this. She runs off. Verushka offers to give Valentina another ride, promising again to tell her more. In the car, Valentina states how Otto was asking if Verushka had mentioned Hamburg. She doesn't herself understand why he'd ask about that. Verushka admits that she is troubled, but attributes it to the lies printed about Helena. Valentina mentions discovering the identity of the woman whom she'd witnessed being murdered, stating the police said it was a suicide. Oh, well, hold on. A murder is faked as a vehicular accident. 5 points. Remember, Inspector Serino said she was mangled by a train. Verushka name drops Dolores, implying she knows about the woman. Then she points out that they're being tailed by someone. The car following them passes them, and we see two men inside before it speeds off. Verushka says Dolores was a friend of Helena, and it is more than likely that both women were murdered by the same person. She asks for Valentina's help to catch the killer. The women are being spied upon by the same two men in the car. The women pull into an estate and head in. Valentina sees the same young man standing outside, and he has a dead cat. Animals featured. Cat. Extra points for it being killed. 7 points. Extra points for Z is for zoom for a zoom on a dead body. 5 points. The man claims that he didn't do it, but he knows who did. But again, warns Valentina to be careful. He runs off. Verushka says that was Pepito, one of Dolores' old friends. He's strange, but harmless. Inside, Valentina confirms a portrait of Dolores is the same woman whom she saw being murdered. In another room, Verushka shows Valentina a scrapbook and asks her if anybody is the killer. She, in fact, fingers the killer in a photo with Helena. The man is said to be Helena's manager, Henri. The women are suddenly confronted by the very same man. He confesses to killing Dolores in order to avenge the murder of Helena. Verushka protests knowing what Henri is talking about. He declares he must kill Valentina, but the lights go out and in storms the two men. One chases Henri while the other searches for Valentina. She sneaks out and runs around the house to the car, but discovers the murdered body of Verushka inside. Extra points for K is for knives, for the knife being bloodied. 5 points. She sees Henri escape, then she too flees the premises. She passes the car of the two men and runs down the street. She runs to a public phone and makes a call. T is for telephone. 5 points. Cut to the inspector being chewed out by the commissioner. Serino is pressured to stop a dope ring. The phone rings and he answers. Cut again to the police with Valentina. She attests what happened, but there's no body, and so Inspector Serino is skeptical, insisting that she is making up a bunch of lies. The police find car tracks on the ground, and Valentina swears they must be Verushka's. They even find a handkerchief on the ground with a V stitched into it. But the inspector posits that the V could just as easily stand for Valentina. Along with it, the inspector finds Joe's business card with Valentina's phone number scribed on the back. He orders her out with it, but she argues that she is telling the truth. She then remembers the photographs inside. She goes to show him, but wouldn't you know it, the exact photo she means to show him is missing. Serino has had enough and takes Valentina in for her sworn statement. As the police leave, we see the dead cat is still outside. Valentina finds Vanessa and asks where Stefano is. She says there were troubles at the gallery today, low sales, and he's likely getting drunk somewhere. Cut over to Otto putting a missing persons report in for his wife. Serino walks in. He asks for Joe Baldi, but the police have not been able to locate him all day. Just then, Joe arrives. The inspector says he needs Joe's cooperation. Back at Stefano's, the children haven't seen him either. Serino reveals he'd found Joe's card near a scene of interest earlier, but Joe contends that he hands out more than 20 of those cards a day. The inspector presses him on this one having Valentina's number on it. He asks what Joe was doing in Hamburg 3 years back, but Joe responds that he cannot possibly remember what he, a reporter, was doing 3 years ago in Hamburg. Stefano stumbles home plastered. He takes his frustration out on Valentina. Typical 1970s Italian misogyny, woman is slapped. 5 points. As she storms out, the phone is disconnected. The commissioner names the two suspicious men as Juan and Hans. The two are drug traffickers who operate out of Hamburg, but have been in Milan for the past 10 days and belong to a syndicate that traffics in narcotics. The lab calls to inform the inspector that Dolores was dead before she was mangled by the train. Their suicide case is now a homicide investigation. Serino asks his assistant to bring in that woman he told him to find, but he says she's not answering her calls. Valentina arrives home as the phone rings, but when she answers, the call has already been disconnected. We cut back to the police department, where it appears that the police tried and failed to make contact with the woman, which, if it is Valentina, it doesn't make sense why the inspector has been so cryptic about who the woman is. We find the two drug traffickers sitting outside at a cafe. Joe walks by and uses Juan's cigarette to light his own. Joe walks in and orders a J&B. J is for J&B, and since we have seen people drinking whiskey the entire film, it's just now we finally see the bottle, I will grant extra points for J&B being drunk. 10 points. Inspector Serino arrives at a crime scene where Professor Otto Wuttenberg is dead. It is ruled as a suicide, but Serino notices no burn marks and proclaims this is another murder. Valentina is awakened at home by the spike fist being thrown and smashing through her window. She notices Henri being apprehended by Juan and Hans, who beat him up. She calls the police at once. Well, she calls the inspector's hotline, but Serino is out. Pepito is also there to see Inspector Serino. Instead of just calling the police, she calls Stefano, but his phone is still disconnected. She prepares to leave herself, but the phone rings. It's Joe, who shares that he's just down the block. She tells him what is happening, and he rushes to meet her downstairs. The two bribe the porter to let them upstairs into the vacant floor, but it's empty. Joe looks all over, but there's no signs of anybody. He demands to know what is going on, but Valentina swears her story is true. He insults her, so she smacks him and leaves. She heads back up, while Joe orders a triple of J&B. Valentina passes the friendly whistling porter on her way in. Inside, she finds Juan and Hans and Henri murdered. She's held at gunpoint as the porter announces that he'll be back in 10 minutes. He just needs to grab some milk. Okay, so that bit did come back. Hans grabs Valentina and forces her fingerprints onto the murder weapon. Stefano is seen riding over. The men rip Valentina's clothes and begin to stage the scene to appear as a suicide. She breaks free, but is caught once again and smacked repeatedly. Stefano arrives, grabs a wrapped present, and heads up. While Juan prepares Valentina, Hans blares music to drown out the struggle. The door buzzes, and the men freeze. Outside, Stefano lets himself in and finds them all inside. Valentina runs to him, safe now, but he asks the men what she's still doing alive. Hidden identity of the killer until the final moments. I'll grant it because he's the mastermind of this. 5 points. Stefano lays out his plan. Valentina will take her own life because of her guilt for murdering the others and finally snapping with insanity. The box he brought is full of drugs, and she will appear to be suspiciously involved in the drug ring. We cut to Pepito showing Inspector Serino where Verushka's corpse is. He says he's known her 6 years back. Stefano says 6 years ago he was a penniless artist. He became Helena's lover. When Helena got busted, Stefano took up with her friend, Dolores. Dolores was loaded because she was a boss with her partner, Professor Otto Wuttenberg. Stefano had taken over Helena's turf, but when Hamburg became too hot for their operations, they switched to Milan. Stefano says he got hooked up with Valentina solely because she had an apartment across the street from where they ran their enterprise, the now vacant room across the way. He could stay at Valentina's and keep an eye on the drugs. One night, though, he saw Helena making it with Nicola, the man framed at the asylum. Nicola planned to run the others out of the business and operate it by himself. One night, Stefano convinced Helena to meet him upstairs, and he murdered her with the sadistic weapon. He'd staged a drugged Nicola next to the body and the murder weapon. Then Stefano had called Henri, Helena's manager, and told him that Dolores had killed her out of jealousy. Pause. Extra points for T is for telephone for the killer making a call. 5 more points. Henri, incensed, then killed Dolores the same way in which Helena was murdered. Stefano easily eliminated 2 of his bosses in the dope ring. Back with Inspector Serino, a cop finds a stash of heroin in a secret compartment. We find out the drugs have been trafficked in packing cases with all of the art statues. The cops put out an APB for Stefano. Stefano says these 2 men dispatched the professor, Henri, and Verushka. Just then, whistling. The porter is back. Let's pause again because I want to tell you this whole reveal according to the Italian language version now, which runs a little longer. It is mostly the same, but has some better details. Okay, so 6 years ago, Stefano lived in Hamburg with a young striptease artist, Helena, who wasn't very good, although she made a lot of money, and she gave it all to him. Helena's friend Dolores was richer than her because she and her partner Otto were bosses in a drug-dealing gang. Dolores fell in love with Stefano and convinced the professor to join the gang. Police found drugs in Helena's apartment, and so she was arrested. Stefano and Dolores came to Milan to set up a new operation. When Stefano mentions being able to use Valentina's apartment to spy on the building next door, the story changes slightly to now he is observing Dolores hooking up with Nicola. He says the business registered in the building was a fake import company that sold pharmaceuticals, but was in actuality a front for selling drugs. Stefano didn't care that Dolores was in love with Nicola now. However, when he sold drugs for them, he lined his pockets and inevitably had 30 kilos of heroin stashed on the side. One day, Stefano ran into Helena, recently out of prison and on tour with her manager. In order to prevent her from reporting him to the police, he murdered her. Then it's a bit of the same. He framed Nicola and called up Henri and told him Dolores had murdered Helena out of jealousy. Henri then killed Dolores, and Stefano was rid of one of the leaders in his operation. He then says Juan and Hans took care of Otto, Dolores, and Henri. When he says Dolores, I think he means to say Verushka, that they killed Verushka, but I believe that he mentions Dolores here to admit that they're the ones who set up the murder to appear as a suicide. So, all in all, there are a few differences between the English version and the Italian version. I think the Italian one is more succinct and makes more logical sense, but both versions seem to have minor mistakes. I don't know. Oh yeah, the porter is outside. Stefano threatens Valentina to get the porter to leave. She dismisses him. Joe sits outside at the cafe in the same table where Juan and Hans were sitting and peruses their paper, where he finds Valentina's photo circled in red. Odd clue, 5 points. He runs upstairs. The men are about to dispatch Valentina, but the buzzer rings. Joe demands to be let in or he'll break down the door. Stefano opens the door and says that Valentina is taking a bath. Joe sees Henri's corpse over Stefano's shoulder. He asks for a light, then shoulders his way inside. He beats Stefano down, throws Hans across the room, but Juan hangs Valentina. Joe cuts her free, then wrestles with Juan. After some back and forth, Joe announces that he is a witness and that they'd better stop him or he'll tell the police, and he runs off. The two men pursue him. Joe runs to the roof, fighting off the men who chase him still. Rooftop scene, extra points for it also being a chase, 7 points. He loses the men, who split up to find him. Joe nearly plants Juan, but he recovers until Joe's fist knocks him into a skylight. The sound alerts Hans, who throws a dagger which sticks in Joe's weapon, a shovel. Juan gains the upper hand and the two struggle for dominance. Joe leads him on another chase. Back in the room, Valentina attacks Stefano, but he knocks her out cold. Joe trips Juan into a wall of styrofoam bricks, but runs into Hans holding a knife. Juan wants to finish off Joe and comes a-swinging with a brick, but Joe knocks Juan off the roof. Juan transforms into a mannequin, which screams all the way down to the pavement. Rooftop scene ending in a death. Let's go for the full points now, so we'll add 3 more points. Someone dies by falling to their death. 15 points. One of the killers dies accidentally by falling to their death. 10 points. One of the killers is killed by someone. 10 points. The police storm inside the building. Hans launches a dagger into Joe's arm, but he rips it out and throws the hurt to Hans. He rubs his face in what I believe is a plaster or cement mixture. Stefano breaks it up and engages Joe in a one-on-one. He beats Joe down, but Joe fights back. Stefano gains the upper hand once again and throws Joe around like a rag doll. He lightly pushes Joe's head through some sugar glass, then goes for the kill, but bang! Is shot dead by Valentina. She runs to Joe, but Hans readies 2 daggers to throw at the both of them. Bang! He is shot dead by Inspector Serino. Police storm the roof, and the movie ends there. Let's add up some final cliches. S is for secrets. Extra points for the killer having an impossible to predict motivation. 10 points. O is for obsession. Extra points for the killer or the sleuth being obsessed. 10 points. Mistaken identity of the killer to Nicola rotting in an asylum. 5 points. Woman is saved by a man. 10 points. Because the inspector needed all of the heavy lifting to be done by the commissioner and only arrived at the last second to save the day, useless police. 2 points. And because Juan has the most over-the-top death, the killer is hilariously killed in their own death scene. 12 points. And finally, betrayal by the killer for Stefano setting up Dolores' murder. 5 points. No extra points to R is for reporter because Joe never becomes a sleuth. And that's Death Walks at Midnight. Okay, honest thoughts. I will say this. I do enjoy the movie more after writing the GialliTally, as is the case whenever I watch, a giallo film that I don't quite connect with. Usually a lot of that has to do with I had a hard time getting into it, therefore I wasn't able to really follow, from beat to beat to beat to beat, A to B to C to D to E. And once I write the GialliTally, I'm able to pick up on, oh, that's how we ended up here. Oh, that's how this, oh, okay. And I do like it more, but I still stand by what I said, and that is, this script is all over the place. I love Ernesto Gastaldi, but this one just takes way too many liberties. First off, the drug plot is so overly convoluted, and a lot of stuff happens in this script because it's interesting and because it needs to happen, or else the plot doesn't move forward. And I don't like that. I'm gonna just be honest. The whole, I'm witnessing a crime in the room, in the building next door, and then we get all this information about how that was a drug smuggling thing, which, by the way, we don't even get that information sprinkled in. We get it all told to us at the very end. Again, I don't like that. I don't like when the movie has to take 4.5 minutes to explain everything that we didn't know. That's way too much time. Way too much time. It's like, yeah, so that, what else can I complain about? The character of Pepito, he's just weird, and he keeps telling Valentina that she's in danger. Like, his character, I feel like, could be cut, and we wouldn't really miss anything. All we get is that he was like, I was friends with Nicola, he's innocent. And then he shows the police the body, he shows the police where Verushka's body is because he was tailing the two murderers. Honestly, they could have gotten tipped. They could have gotten a tip to find the body. They could have found it themselves. You could really cut out Pepito's character entirely and not lose anything. Verushka is a little odd. Again, like, I bet like the idea of this on paper was really good, and it's just in the course of writing it, the execution, it just doesn't really work. There's just a lot of stuff that happens that is a little stupid, a little silly, and yeah. Again, no disrespect if you enjoy this movie. I enjoy a lot of giallo films that are, not entirely there in the writing department, but this one for me is just too convoluted. It's just too much. And funny enough, also, Stefano is like really clearly up to something, so when he's revealed to be involved, it's sort of a surprise because of to the degree that he's involved, but it's also not really that surprising. Like, everybody is blowing off Valentina when she's trying to tell them what's going on. Like, Joe doesn't believe her, but he doesn't believe her for like logical reasons that make sense. Stefano just like blows her off. Like, he's just talking to her like she's an idiot. And like when she's trying to tell him like, look, the door is broken, he's just like, why'd you break the door? Like, why are you doing this? It's too in the service of, we got to keep the plot moving so nobody believes her. I don't know. But yeah, I gotta say, Death Walks at Midnight, I just can't really get into. And then, oh my God, like the degree of killers. Like, how did Stefano know that Henri would murder Dolores? Again, in the Italian version, it actually makes more sense because it said that Helena was let out of prison and then she was going on tour. But it's like, wait, she's a singer now? I thought she was a failed striptease artist. Or I guess she was an okay striptease artist. Whatever, I'm getting off. Like, I just want to get this over with now. Let's segue to the GialliTally cliches for this movie. Post-giallo viewing cliches. The reason for the killing. A bit of greed and gain, revenge, and obsession. Well, since revenge and obsession are worth the same, let's do 7 points. The reason for the investigation. Yes, we have police investigators, but they don't really do anything. But Valentina's motive is sort of a combination of proving innocence and obsession. 10 points. And because she's an amateur sleuth, 5 points. Bonus points. The style bonus. The film is relatively stylish. It's not too in your face with it, and it's actually fairly reserved compared to a lot of other giallo films of the era. There's a fair usage of slow zooms in and out, even fewer crash zooms, I think. Some good focus racking, that's probably the best usage, and at least one time where we see a POV. We also get this interesting lighting for when Valentina is blinded, but honestly, there's not too much use of style. It actually blends very well with the film. Out of a maximum of 25 points possible, I will give Death Walks at Midnight 12 points for its style bonus. Soundtrack. Yes, 15 points. Bad effects. There are actually great effects, but also one terrible fake body, and so yeah, full points for bad effects, 15 points. Final look, extra points. The Deadpool, tallying how many kills and deaths are featured in the film. I break it down as thus: 10 points per kill or death scene for the main Deadpool, plus any stylistic kill multipliers, which we didn't add yet, plus the knife kill bonus. We have Dolores, bludgeoned but impaled. So, for the murders that involve the spiked fist, I will grant the greater of the two, which is impaled, 16 points. Verushka, impaled with a knife, 21 points. Otto, shot dead, 10 points. Henri, impaled with a knife, 21 points. Helena, impaled with the fist thing, 16 points. Juan, fell to his death, 10 points. Stefano, shot dead, 10 points. And Hans, shot dead, 10 points. Red herrings for the total number of legitimate suspects in the film. 5 points per legit suspect are awarded. We have Henri, Stefano, Joe, Pepito, Verushka, Otto, Juan, and Hans. 40 points for red herrings. Flashback sequences, 5 points each. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. 60 points for flashbacks. Nudity, I award 5 points for ass, 7 for breasts, and 10 for genitalia. We have breasts, breasts and ass, breasts, ass, and breasts. 38 points for nudity. Ladies and gentlemen, for Death Walks at Midnight, I awarded the film an AZ score of 19 out of 26. With the bonus points for these, we have a modified score total of 160 points. And for the full GialliTally score, I award Death Walks at Midnight a GialliTally score of 844 points, compared to Tropic of Cancer in first with 1,124 points, Short Night of Glass Dolls in second with 969 points, and What Have You Done to Solange in third with 933 points. Death Walks at Midnight is in sixth place with 844 points. I predicted around 575 to 625 points, so I was way off, which was interesting to see how this film garnered so many points. But like I say, these points do not mean a movie is better or worse. Please like this video, share it with your friends if they are horror fans or cinephiles, subscribe to The King in Giallo if you haven't yet, and if you have any questions, thoughts, curiosities, or concerns, leave those below in the comments section and I will get back to you. Give The King in Giallo a follow on Instagram and a like on Facebook. Subscribe to The King in Giallo Patreon to see early access to all of the YouTube videos, exclusive video series that can only be found there, and to generally support what I do. Next time on The King in Giallo will be the overview, review, and GialliTally for the one and only Giallo film directed by Francesco Mazzei, The Weapon, the Hour, and the Motive, released on November 23rd, 1972. Thank you very much for your continued support, and a special thank you to those who support me on Patreon. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.